Hey everybody, this is What the What, and I'm Scott, and I am not scuba certified.
Jeff, I am scuba certified, and I am going to Oktoberfest tomorrow.
This is Renee, not scuba certified, and I'm not going to Oktoberfest, but October is, I'm going to go on record, the best month of the year.
I do like October.
It's the best.
There's good stuff that happens.
Arguably, fight me on it. I mean, it's the best month. And I was born in November, so you would think, but no, October's the best.
Well, you're very giving to let us have the other month be the best month, and
right.
That doesn't necessarily have to be your birth
That's
month.
true. There you go.
Yeah, and in Tucson, I mean, we get like double great stuff because we have the All Souls procession, and really, I think there's kind of a different sensibility here amongst people for even, Halloween's Halloween, but we have some other kind of ways of entering into that and thinking about it that really make this time of year in general, I think, really special.
Superb.
Yeah.
Let's say hello to the dead.
Yay. Hey, dead. If there's anybody dead listening,
Hey, dead listeners.
tell your dead friends.
Spread the word.
Isn't
Spread
that
the
in
word.
November?
Technically, yes.
And November has 2 holidays,
Yeah.
which makes it the best month. Because that's actually 3 days I don't have to go to work.
2 holidays? What other? Veterans Day?
Yes, Veterans Day and Thanksgiving.
Fair.
Isn't February, like with the presidents and, well, if you get, is Martin Luther King Day in February?
I think states all got to choose one.
Oh, okay.
But February is the worst month. The worst.
Because it's Black History Month? Where are you going with this?
Whoa.
Because it's
I
the
think
shortest.
We need to explore this.
Because they shortchanged people.
Why?
Because it's the shortest month of the year. Of course, they gave it to the black people, right? Like that's not it. No, it's
Renee,
the worst.
Why do you hate Black History Month?
It's the worst month because it's it's winter. It's come around the corner. You've been in the cold. It's just.
We all know the real reason Renee hates February, and it's because that's the month of Valentine's Day.
It's not good. It doesn't help.
Renee hates happiness, love, and
very
Cupid.
curmudgeonly. You're right. That's
And
right.
Love Actually, which doesn't happen in that month, but you don't like Love Actually, right?
Oh, it is. Someday we will talk about it in this podcast. The worst movie. It is.
Best movie.
We need to
I'm
move.
crying right now on the inside because I'm so happy for all the people in that movie.
We got to move.
Moving on.
I can't
beer.
even speak about it.
Hey, so we have beer cans in front of us. Interestingly enough, that play right into, as if we had, people might actually listening to this think that we plan these things, and let's hope that they do. So, Jeff, why don't you talk a little bit about this beer?
So this is a Belching Beavers Mexican-style lager with lime. This is out of, I think it's Oceanside, California. These are almost tall boys and very elaborate bottles. So
I will say
one of the best names ever for a brewery.
These are 100%. Oh, it's a can. It's not a.
It is a can.
Yeah. Okay. These are 100% my favorite so far.
That was, you couldn't hear Anna, who just corrected Jeff. So, and that it is actually a can that we're talking about.
Yeah.
In case the listening audience is confused as to why there was that strange gap and a reassignment of a can to a bottle or a bottle to a can.
And apparently it's not my first can of the day. So.
But the graphic design on this is beautiful. This is the sort of illustration. It has a woman in the Day of the Dead face paint, and it's pretty stunning. Very well done.
Would that
straight up my favorite?
Is this a sugar skull? Is that the name of this artwork?
Kind of
Similar.
on the theme of a sugar skull.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think when it's just a skull when it's on your face. Yeah.
So would your friend that we were talking about off mic, would she consider this cultural appropriation?
Well, it depends if the people who are creating this whole thing, right, the artwork or the brewery itself, have any sort of feet within that community. Like if you are from that community, you can use that art any way that you want to see fit and do it. But if it's just some 2 white guys sitting in there thinking it's clever, then it might be problematic. But we're not going to look too deeply into that.
How much of you has to be from that community? I mean, can Elizabeth Warren do like socks with Native American prints on them? She can't do that. She can wear them.
I am not going to weigh in on that.
But she can't make them.
I'm not going to weigh in on that.
All right, so now we're going to the best time of the show,
All right.
where
The
we
best
actually
time.
taste them.
This is where some people stop listening.
Unless it's a strawberry blonde.
Tonight is
nonsense.
kind of special.
What's the verdict?
That tastes like any Mexican beer with lime in it. That's it. It is as advertised.
Really?
Yeah, I
That
like
is-
it.
Yeah, this is fine. This is a perfectly acceptable beer.
I'm definitely a lager drinker. It's not the only thing that I drink, but I do like a lager, and that little bit of lime seems like it brings me to like sitting on beaches in countries with Spanish sounding names.
That was the way you delivered that was so flat that I kind of like the idea of them using that in their advertising. Them just pulling that soundbite from you and just going to beaches with
I am available for
voice work.
for voice work and for selling out to beer companies that would like to use my voice to promote their product.
Yeah, promo code Belching Beaver, right? Like
Yes.
yeah.
All right. Well, we're all over that. So today we're going to call this episode TED. And just before we started the episode, Anna, our producer, on her cell phone, looked up the word eponymous for us because I am having such a hard time pronouncing that word. And she played it back, and it was very sexy. And I played it was eponymous.
Yeah. The Google voice is disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah, if like Siri was all excited or something like that. But this episode is like an Inception episode because it's double eponymous. Because we're calling this episode of What the What Ted, and we're talking about an episode of a show called Manhunt Unabomber that was also episode 6 in that 8-episode series that was also entitled Ted. So you're getting a double Ted out of this. We the three of us watched it. All three of us. I believe I may be the only one who watched the entire series all the way through the 8 episodes.
Yeah, I watched the assigned one. Yeah.
And the two of you, so you watched this one episode.
Yes.
Right.
I ended up watching about 2.5 episodes because I didn't realize one episode ended. It just kept playing.
Were you half asleep?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So and I will say that this episode to me was really kind of artistically satisfying. I mean, I thought it was really beautiful. It was kind of slow. So if I was to just look at it from that standpoint, the camera work was really nice, whatever. It was a real step away from what the rest of the series had been, which was basically sort of following the story of there's an actor, Sam Worthington, who played a real guy named Jim Fitzgerald, who was an FBI agent, and some of the other people who were some real people who were looking for the Unabomber and looking for the Unabomber over a period of a lot of years. And the series has a bit to do with how they actually use language to sort of ferret out where he was and find him. And we're not going to really do a deep dive into that. But this episode number 6 called Ted is a real departure from the other. And when I was watching it, I thought right away this would be a great thing for us to talk about. It's probably something that maybe not a lot of our listeners have seen because it's not necessarily like the most popular series out there. I mean, it's not The Walking Dead, it's not Game of Thrones, something like that, but probably a few people have. And there's one particular episode that is such a departure. It has this almost sort of like the director Terrence Malick I saw somebody refer to. There's a letter that Ted Kaczynski is writing. The FBI investigation is totally out of this episode, which is not true of any of the other 7 episodes. The other 7 episodes are really about the FBI trying to find him and pin him down. And so what we come to is, I'm going to interpret a little bit, and then I want to kind of throw the question out to you to see what we think. It seems to me that the filmmakers or TV makers, as they were, took a break all of a sudden and said, we want you to feel a certain sense of empathy for the Unabomber. If you're not just going to get in bed with them, we want you to at least, kind of see things from his eyes. And they run through some things that happened to him as a kid, which are not all historically accurate, but at least representational. they ran through some things. A lot of people now know that he was in this sort of Harvard psychological study, which sounds like it really probably did scar him. He was quite young when he went to college, and he got involved in this psychological study that was really sort of a, now we look at it, as like an almost deep state study, but at the time it was called MK Ultra. A lot of people have heard about that. They were behind a lot of like trying to figure out, can we use ESP on our enemies, and psychological torture and things like that. So he actually, over a period of a little bit more than a year, in real life, Ted Kaczynski was part of one of these studies, and sort of unwittingly had some pretty bad things happen to him in that.
Well, it was
all of that said,
pretty crappy study.
Yeah. All of that said, we end up with sort of like kind of a warm, fuzzy Ted in a way, as sort of warm and fuzzy as Ted gets. And my question to you, and I think maybe we will ferret out some more things that happen in the episode just by kind of talking here, but really, like, what is the responsibility of the filmmaker to be accurate? And also, is the filmmaker response? I mean, does the filmmaker need to make us feel empathy for somebody who ultimately ends up killing people, and ultimately ends up, really landing on, maybe having some strong thoughts about how things should be, but acting in really cruel and brutal and capricious ways to sort of see that person's their will come out. So what is the filmmaker's responsibility in a situation? And I really don't know. I'm conflicted about this.
Well, so here's my question. Did you feel empathy for him?
I did. I reluctantly felt empathy for him. And I don't think beforehand that I would have at all. And I know enough to know that I was affected by watching that episode.
Did you feel empathy?
I don't know how much I felt empathy for Ted, but I did feel more anger towards the CIA than I did towards Ted.
No shit, yes.
So
that was some fucked up stuff. Yes. Although we'll have to talk a little bit about this. Also, we want to let you listeners know, #spoilers. We're going to talk about the episode, so we're going to reveal some of the content. So if you want to watch it first and then come back. But I think the point is, not sort of building on your question, I don't know that it's been confirmed that was MK Ultra, that what he was doing.
Yes.
Has it been? Because I looked some research up and I couldn't find anything that confirmed it. So did you?
Yeah. So I mean, just the Wikipedia article. If you look up the MK Ultra Wikipedia article, it says that Ted Kaczynski was one of the people that is believed to have been associated with it. And Charles Murray was the name of the almost guaranteed that he was involved in it.
Yeah, those Murray studies. So
now
the real quick, the problem is in either 74, somewhere between 74 and 76, the head, John Dulles, I think, the head of the CIA, ordered the destruction of all records of MK Ultra.
Right.
And there's very little remaining, so it's very hard. Even though everybody suspects that Ted Kaczynski was in the study and Charles Murray was running this particular study, there is almost no documentation of anything because it was all destroyed in the 70s.
Right. I guess that was my point. Like it's strongly believed to be so, but it hasn't necessarily been. And so my degree is in research psychology, right? My undergrad. That makes it sound like I have a grad degree. I don't, but I'm just saying that. Is in psychology, and the human rights the violations, the test subject violations in that were mind-boggling.
Egregious.
It was appalling what they did to him and everyone else, right? Like what he went through. I agree. Like that was kind of my takeaway. I'm like, this is so fucked up. But separate from that, because part of what he's doing within that episode is he's narrating, walking us through as viewers through several key points in his life where there was this quote unquote betrayal that happened to him. I'm putting that in quotes. Betrayal, where somebody betrayed him. And so it sort of made him, it was positioning him as a person who had been done wrong by the world. But I didn't buy that.
Right.
So, Scott, so the scene, what she's talking about is a scene where, as a child, he had a friend, and then the friend decided to go hang out with a girl, and then Ted walked up on them and they're like, oh, freaky Ted, and started throwing rocks at him. So which kind of set up, and then so it set up two things. One, it started setting up some sympathy for him because like he's being, you know, betrayed by his friends, and then it also established that he was a vindictive asshole as a child because he ended up setting up an explosion in class with this boy. And
so that didn't happen that way. What the filmmakers say, see, this is why I think this is very interesting, right? And including, so I'm going to get back and talk about this study and what we saw, because the study is abhorrent and egregious, but it's interesting what we saw in this episode, Ted. But let's talk about the friend first. The filmmakers say that that's an amalgamation of stories that are designed to show you kind of what Ted's experiences were like when he was a kid. And the bomb that he supposedly like gave to set up in front of a friend is based on a story that Ted Kaczynski wrote when he was quite young, and not necessarily reality. And there's nowhere that I can find going back to look where it says that Ted actually exploded an incendiary device in a like junior high school classroom. So those were both designed by the filmmakers to help you do what I think they felt was understand Ted, but by putting a whole bunch of stuff into a couple quick little narratives to try to give you a sense.
So that, with that understanding, it actually changes what I was about to say, and it changes my opinion of that show overall. So there's another character in another movie that we're going to be talking about pretty soon, Joker. Mm-hmm. There's a really famous comic or trade paperback of the Joker called The Killing Joke, and the Joker's whole point in that particular story was one bad day. Anybody can become a monster if there's just one bad day that pushes them over the edge. Also a similar theme from the movie Falling Down.
I was just thinking about Falling Down.
So I mean, it's a concept that comes up over and over and over again. And on the one hand, the filmmakers for this show really tried to push this idea with the MKUltra study that it was one bad day that pushed Ted into being the Unabomber. But then their caveat to that was, the counter to that was, he was also well on his way to being a serial killer as a child. And if that aspect of it was completely manufactured, then I don't know what they're trying to say.
It's like you can't have both of those. Right. I mean, that's some of what I was thinking when I was watching is it feels to me like the filmmakers, and again, so I'll come back to my question. It's like, what's their responsibility in this? Because if the art doesn't, the art doesn't have to worry about what anybody else says about it, then the filmmakers don't have any responsibility. They can do whatever they want. But if he's sort of this like maybe autistic or on the spectrum or something kind of kid who really can't read and understand what people are thinking about him, that causes problems for him. And if things happen that way and he sets an incendiary device, you could sort of look at it and have kind of one kind of idea about him. If you look at what they set up as these Harvard MKUltra studies, you might go, oh, that's the thing that triggered, like he was sort of this way and that kind of pushed them, over the edge. Or is it something else that, that just sort of comes along? Well, maybe it's the sense of isolation that he has where he's just so far away. They have him sort of like, he fantasizes, not in a real sexual way, but he fantasizes about this woman in town who's a librarian. Now, there's no way they could know if that actually happened or didn't happen, I suppose, unless he probably said so. But even that is sort of designed to say, at one point he says, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I think that's the last line of the episode is Ted saying it wasn't supposed to be like this. And he's sleeping with a bomb that he's just made under his bed, right? So the filmmakers are like, I don't think they quite know what they wanted to do with that episode either.
Yeah, and I think they did. I think they were trying to, I think they were actually going at it a little bit too directly in some ways. But it wasn't a single episode. I think it was probably the runtime is about 45 minutes. And I think what's difficult is that they were showing us these moments where I think they did do a very good job of showing us his social isolation. And he was narrating about these moments he felt were kind of pivotal in his life that kind of pushed him to be so alone. But there's this one moment towards the end of the episode where he's been invited to the birthday party. He clearly has made this connection with this young boy. It's the son of the librarian, and that kid is just desperate for this father figure, and it's kind of like, come to my party. And Ted's like, I don't know if I can. And the kid is, you can tell, just like wants this connection, and Ted sort of it becomes this sort of dueling thread within the narrative of him being like, am I going to go to this birthday party, which is symbolized by the invite, or am I going to build this bomb? So at some point he's like, I'm going to go do this other thing, right? And so he has that little birthday card, and he wraps up that present, and he walks over and he looks inside, and that's the part, like, Ted Kaczynski as a young person suffering with social isolation. I felt really intensely about that, which is why I don't watch a lot of dramas. I felt very sad for him. It was very crushing to see someone isolated as a young person who hasn't been supported and doesn't have the skills. But by the time he is walking up to that door, he is a grown man, and it is his job as an adult to get over himself, right? So when he's looking at himself in the reflection and he's looking at this kid and then he decides to not go inside, at that point, it's all him. He is totally responsible for that. So I was like, pull up your goddamn big boy pants and go inside and make human connections. But you're the one, no, they didn't push you away. They didn't betray you in any way. They wanted you there and you chose to not be. So by the end, I think they were trying to say like he almost, but he could. By the end, I wasn't buying that part, right?
So to answer your question from my perspective, filmmakers, artists in general have the same responsibility everybody does. Tell the truth. As best as you can, tell the truth. And you might be wrong, and somebody might come along and tell you why you're wrong, but at that moment, do the best you can to tell the truth. And from what, I don't know a lot about Ted Kaczynski, I've never studied him, but just the little bit I've been reading to prepare for this, ultimately, besides just manipulating the audience, they also didn't honor the subject they were talking about. Ted Kaczynski, he never felt any contrition, never showed any contrition for what he did. He, in his mind, regardless of how that mind was manufactured, in his mind, he had a argument, and he had a purpose, and he had a reason for doing what he did. And the way they framed the story, the way they told that story, takes away his agency and absolves him of any responsibility. He had his manifesto. He had a reason for doing what he did, and they're trying to say, well, he could have gone a different way, maybe.
Also, could have all of us.
He chose. He to the point where when he was getting ready to stand trial, he refused to let his lawyers make an insanity argument, and he ended up pleading guilty to all the charges to avoid anybody even suggesting that he was crazy. Whether or not he was crazy, or whether or not he had a diagnosable mental condition is debatable, or even if he did, what that actually means. But right. he clearly had agency. He had an agenda, and he was fulfilling it. The best thing to do is to show that. Even if it gets uncomfortable, show that so that we can evaluate what we think about the truth, and not try to mix these mixed messages. Because at the end of the day, all we ended up watching was fantasy.
Yeah, and here's another thing to think about too. At the time that this fictional episode, maybe based on some, the letter that he wrote his brother is another amalgamation. Like, that's not actually a letter that he wrote his brother. That's pulled from lots of different things that he wrote, but it is sort of cobbled together. So they try to make it sort of feel like almost one day he sits down. It's like, it's almost the one day thing, but going the other way, right. Almost like Ted Kaczynski could have pulled himself out of this. But let's not forget, by this time in the narrative, he's already killed people, maimed people, sent the bombs out. I mean, he's down the road. If we're supposed to believe that he had the opportunity to be a good guy, I would have felt that he had the opportunity to be a good guy before he started sending the bombs out. Like, after the fact, he just doesn't get a pass from me. It's right. Like, yeah, okay, you help a kid with his math. Great. Maybe that makes you feel a little bit better about yourself. But you've still killed, I think, killed 2 people.
3, I think.
Injured, I think, 12.
Yeah.
And, put a bomb on a plane at one point. It just didn't happen to go off. So you know, this is like not a good guy that we should be feeling at that point in his life empathy or sympathy for.
Yeah, I think so. I think they were trying to show a diamond in the rough. They were trying to tell a diamond in the rough story. Like you see these feel good stories every once in a while on Good Morning America, where the homeless guy was found and taken in and given a makeover, and turns out he has like a world class singing voice. And if somebody had just appreciated him, he would have been okay. If Hitler hadn't failed his art class,
Right.
there never would have been.
It shifts the blame on society to like, yeah.
And while society has some blame, you know, well, there is some blame to shift onto society at the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah, at the end of the day, people still have agency and still can make their decisions and their choices. So
I thought it was curious too, because this idea that they, just given what you talked about the other episodes, why they threw this one in, like what it served that larger narrative to have that be part of it.
I think they honestly, of course it's on. I'm talking, so I'm telling the truth. Of course that's honestly. I think they wanted to put the brakes on. I think they wanted to do 8 episodes instead of 7, and like because they were at sort of a critical point. Like they get to the point where the FBI is just about going to like they know where he is. They've got surveillance on the cabin. Like all of that stuff is happening, and then you come back in the next episode and it's slow, and the FBI is not in it anywhere.
Oh, I see.
And
okay.
it's just, and I think it was just. It's actually kind of a nice dramatic device to just sort of change it up, surprise us a little bit. You know, don't have any of the FBI agents in it, whatever. So I actually kind of appreciated that. But it's really a well-structured episode, and it's quite beautiful. And
yeah,
I'm just not sure that it was genuine or true.
Correct.
in that sense, it would be very similar to the Band of Brothers episode, Private Blythe. All of a sudden you have this one episode out of nowhere talking about this character that had nothing to do with anything else in the show. Wasn't really referenced later on in the show, just like, we're just going to stop and talk about this one random story.
Yeah, it sounds like I haven't seen.
You should see Band of Brothers. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. I don't know if I can handle it. It sounds intense. I mean, it is. I mean, it is intense. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. But I do want to touch upon this idea about the truth of something, right? And we had talked about that being sort of its own separate podcast, just talking about it, covering a lot of stuff. But if we look at it from a writing perspective, we have this form that we call creative nonfiction, which is this premise that you stick mainly to the truth, but you take some creative liberties. And so you're putting it in the world saying, this is close, almost based on a true story, but not quite. And I think that's an important space for us to hold as creative people and artists. And so in that sense, like for me, I don't want to universally say, no, that isn't something you should do, because an amalgamation is something I would use as a writer. Like I would summarize some childhood experiences and maybe put them together as one. And so that I think isn't inherently problematic.
Right. But is the creator using that device to highlight the truth or to misdirect people from the
Correct.
truth? And that's the distinction.
Well, and I would say correct, right? Like the intention, but I think it could be argued that they felt they were giving the truth. That he is, like, he did blow people up, but he also had this other part that wished for something different. That doesn't necessarily mean it's false.
Yeah, there's a Native American saying that is something sort of loosely that's like, I don't know if the story that I'm about to tell you really happened, but I know that it's true, right? So there's a way of doing that. But I think that for me, I'll weigh in on what I think the responsibility of the filmmakers in this case is to at least understand that there are going to be a lot of people that you can be doing your creative nonfiction, but there are going to be a lot of people who walk away, and this is going to be their narrative of who Ted Kaczynski was. And I guarantee there are people who are sitting around dinner tables saying, did you realize that when he was a kid, he blew up this incendiary device? And I mean, they should have known back then that he was, and that actually turns out to be something that's not true.
I think I'm starting to rub off on you. because we've had this discussion several times over the last few months, and that's usually the point I make, and that's usually when you say you're wrong.
There are some fine lines on some of this stuff, and like I remember I got like really sort of up in it over the movie Fargo, which I really like the movie Fargo, but at the, I think at the beginning of the movie Fargo it says something like based on a true story, and everybody starts saying like, wow, that was such an interesting case that happened with that car dealership in Fargo, North Dakota, and it's like, it's not a true story. It's not even close to a true story. It's based on an idea of something. And I think that the Coen brothers actually were kind of playing with that a little bit, sure. Right? I mean, they were throwing something out that entirely didn't happen, and they had everybody believed it.
History Buffs, a channel on YouTube. It's a great channel for that very topic. And they did an episode. He talked about Fargo and that it was not true.
Right.
But
I mean, I'm watching this new TV show, Sunnyside, which is one of the new NBC comedies, and I won't go into the plot of it, but at one point they're theoretically teaching each other history, right? And they're playing this game about figures in history, and they're trying to make it fun. So they're doing it as like they're doing it as this game where like you get the clues and you have to guess who it is. And at some point it's Tyrion Lannister, right? And so like who isn't it's all made up, right? It's purely fiction, right? I think there's something interesting that happens.
Was a Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that was a Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get that, but I nodded because I wanted.
You guys like you guys didn't want to look like you didn't know what.
I wanted you to think I was cool.
I was like, come on, Tyrion. You guys know, right? Tyrion Lannister. And there's something about the experience of art, particularly filmmaking, which is a very visual experience, TV, that does feel real. Like certain things feel like they happened, and so people will sometimes. So there are people in the world who I have heard tale of people in the world who wanted to know at what period in our history Game of Thrones happened, meaning they wanted to understand where it fit into our timeline.
1347.
Right? When did we have dragons? When did we have? So I'm only saying that in the sense that like the ability to parse story from history is not something we're particularly strong at as humans. That's why story exists. We can confound people very easily. So we do have a duty as humans to sometimes track down the truth, which is maybe separate from the duty of filmmakers to be true. I would say, perhaps, potentially.
Yeah. Okay. To the little old lady that was calling the Coast Guard, asking them when they're going to rescue those 7 people off the island. True story. Gilligan's Island. There were people that were legitimately concerned that people were stranded on an island.
Wait, I thought that was a documentary. You're saying?
Yes.
I just thought that there was an 8th person there with a camera.
I mean, you're right. Like people have an obligation to view everything they see critically,
yeah,
and to evaluate from it. And I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but Americans are terrible at that.
We're not great.
And that's really unfortunate. We should watch everything critically. So, but you also can't fix stupid.
No, yeah.
So just one, really for me, just kind of one other thing to talk about in that episode. I mean, there's a lot of directions we could go with it. It's quite I really would suggest people watch it, even if you don't watch the whole series.
Just watch that one episode, yeah.
It's an interesting episode and a lot to think about. But let's not call it MK Ultra study, but we'll call it that Harvard psychology.
What are they going to do? Come after us? Yeah.
That's an interesting sort of piece of this because it's set designed and shot and lit in such a way to make it appear to be like really horrifying. I mean, it's got sort of a very Clockwork Orange sort of feel where Alex is strapped in the front of the theater and like, they've got Ted in this episode, he's strapped in, but they don't really know what it looked like in there. And so here's another way of thinking about that question, right? It's like we probably at this table, knowing us, would agree that like those studies were horrifying, right? And so the filmmakers are really going out of their way to sell the new word here, horrifyingness of those studies by the use of angles and lighting and how they edit it and all of those things when there was no footage that that exists that they can look at. I think I read somewhere there might still be some transcripts, but there's no footage of that. So so what do you think about that? When it actually then bolsters something, because we all agree that it's horrifying, when it bolsters the horrifyingness, then does the filmmaker have a different responsibility at that point? They can't really know what happened. They know that when people watch this, they're going to buy that it basically happened that way because we know that's what people do. Is their responsibility to just say, sorry, we can't really show you what the room looked like on the inside because we've never seen it, so you just have to guess? Or do they make believe, turn it into something else, and then convince us that it happened in a certain way?
Right. Well, it goes back to what I said earlier. You do your best to tell the truth. Do the research, look at people that have said they went through that stuff and try to recreate as best you can. And the audience has to look at things critically and understand that it's not going to be a point for point recreation of a real event. It's going to have some creative license to it. But just try to tell the truth. What I won't accept is when somebody might say, well, you can't ever completely tell the truth. You can't recreate something exactly. So then everything is fair game. We can throw dragons in there. How do you can't know dragons weren't in there, so we're just going to throw dragons in the room. And that's obviously I'm being hyperbolic, but that's, like Bohemian Rhapsody was crap because it just like we're just gonna tell you whatever story we feel like.
Oh, interesting. So that was one of your challenges with that movie, because it was not as sort of like didn't have fidelity to.
Yeah, they abandoned any claim to truth. They're just like they were more concerned with sticking to the musical biopic formula than actually telling Freddie Mercury's story.
Do you think there's a difference between being honest and being truthful and being honest?
Off the top of my head, no, I would say that's a distinction without a difference.
So truthful might be factually truthful, and honest might be more
emotionally.
More sort of truthful to what was going on. More. I would see being honest about something as maybe being more big picture truthful. To me, like truthful, like if somebody tells me, I'm telling the truth, I want the facts of what they are telling me to be true at that point. So that's one of the things that got me about this episode a little bit, is I think that they were kind of signaling that they were being truthful, but I don't think they were. I think they were trying to be honest about what they thought was going on with Ted. Maybe this might just be my sort of linguistic distinction, but I just don't feel like they were truthful, and that there were enough places where they weren't truthful that it actually was deceptive, and that they were using a deceptive technique to get me to try and see Ted in a way that I think they honestly believed I should see Ted. So there's, I'm a little conflicted.
Yeah. I would tend to agree with you that I think they were being, in this particular episode, they were being deceptive. And it's problematic for me, particularly going back to that stuff we were talking about, the scene with the kid. If their point of view was he had these experiences in college and that created him as a bomber, fine, stick with that.
Right.
But trying to have it both ways, I don't understand what point what they were actually trying to get at, other than to make us feel a certain way to set up the next episode, presumably where he gets caught.
Yeah. Spoiler alert: they caught the Unabomber.
So, and I think they were more interested with, and a lot of shows do this. They're like, we want the audience to feel a certain way at a certain time, so we're going to shift the story to push you into that feeling that way, and they're not really worried about the truthfulness of what they're saying.
And I guess because I'm not like I guess I'm less interested in that. Like I should say I'm less interested in the accuracy of something. I am interested in the sort of emotional,
that's a great word,
push they're trying to get at. So I guess I feel that less strongly, and I think partly because I trust other people to do that work. Like we live in a society, and I know like someone like you, Jeff, would like, you're more likely to track down and like say like, actually this is what happened, this and this, and I engage with enough people who can be like, no, I'm much more fanciful. So like I'm much more, I am interested in sort of the amalgamations and the way of sort of like building narrative that maybe is sort of a distortion a little bit of what actually happened. And I find that interesting.
Yeah. My pattern, if I watch anything that's historical or anything that says it's historical, as soon as I'm done watching it, or sometimes halfway through watching it, I will stop it. I will go research it. And I will look it up because I want to know.
Right.
I want to know before I form opinions about the world based on this thing I'm watching. I want to know if what I'm watching has anything to do with the world I actually live in. Because nothing makes you look dumber than being like, those damn Mayans were terrible people because of what they did to those other Mayans, and you're like, oh, sorry, Mel Gibson's just an idiot making shit up.
I think that's a great place to leave this discussion. And
Mel Gibson is an idiot making
shit up. So,
that's actually the title of this episode.
Yes, it's not Ted. Scratch Ted. Anna, can you change that? So, so I thought this was fascinating. So thanks for engaging and going down the road with me on this. Is there anything else that you guys have to say about the episode?
Jeff had a very pointed
stuff.
I think we just came full circle because Mel Gibson was in that movie where he was the subject of MK Ultra.
Which one?
Now, what movie? It was a movie with Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster.
Taxi Driver?
No. There was a movie I remember the movie where he like they had his eyes propped open real big and they were doing experiments on him.
Mel Gibson.
Yes. This was an early 2000s movie.
I think maybe now we know what happened to Mel Gibson. That explains a lot.
MK
Ultra. So what are you guys into? What have you been looking at, listening to this week?
You got something?
So actually, I caught an episode, and I didn't look it up, but there was an episode on a documentary on Netflix where, in short, I've been doing some research on gender equality in Rwanda, and it is absolutely fascinating.
What's it called?
Yeah, what's it called?
Well, that's the thing. I can't remember the name of the actual show. Like I was scrambling trying to turn off air conditioning and get lights set up in this room. So
we'll put it in the show notes.
I forgot to look it up, but it was a springboard for me to look up some other stuff. And what's happened in Rwanda over the last 20 years is absolutely fascinating. It's really something. For example, Rwanda has led for like 13 or 14 years straight the number of female representation in parliament. They have some like 60% of the parliament is female in Rwanda. And it's because of after the genocides in the 90s where 800,000 people were killed, the country was like 70% female. So they actually wrote it into their constitution that at every level of government, the representative body will be at least 33% female. So it's been really fascinating reading that and seeing what kind of effects that's had on that country. You got anything this week, Renee?
Yeah,
you've been in a writer's retreat.
I have.
So you've been under deep cover.
I don't know. I've been reading a lot though. So I'm like the total opposite of Jeff. I have gone off planet. I am now reading. So I just read the novella All Systems Red by Martha Wells, and it's about an AI unit that becomes sentient, and it is so hilarious. It's fantastically well done. It is one of those books where, as a writer, I read a book and lots of times I feel like this like sort of despair when I read something really, really good, because you think, God, they're doing something so different from me. And Martha Wells is a very brilliant writer who writes really, really entertainingly, in that she writes really short sentences, but she just has this really great idea. The setup, the world building is fantastic. And I think like she makes it look like I could do it. I could do it with Martha Wells. I'm going to go write All Systems Red. Like I'm going to write an equivalent of that. So it was really exciting because most of the time I read a lot of good stuff and then I'm just depressed.
I know, I felt that way reading Hemingway. I'm like, oh, I could write this. And then, I sat down and tried to write like Hemingway. And I'm like, actually, turns out I couldn't.
No, it's not. Yeah, and at the end of the day, like Martha Wells, I mean, she's a strong enough writer that she actually writes a lot of different ways. But and to write just like her would be to copy a very specific the AI names himself Murderbot, and so it would be to mimic him much too closely. It would be taking that character. So it's not in that sense a character. But I think what she did in the story was She just found a great story, and she just wrote it briskly, got us right through all the action, threw in just enough humor, just a perfect balance. It's like the perfect, you can read it. I read it in less than 24 hours. Go out there and read it. It's great.
So I watched with Anna this week 3 episodes of a show on Netflix that was called UK Criminal United Kingdom, and it turns out that there are 3 more sort of little seasons. There's like Criminal Germany and Criminal Spain and Criminal Tanzania or something. I can't remember what the last one.
Tanzania.
Probably not Tanzania. But I have a secret man crush on what's his name? No, not David Tennant. No, from Law and Order: Criminal Intent, and from I can't believe that I can't remember his name.
What sort of man crush do you have?
Yeah.
Vincent D'Onofrio?
Yeah, Vincent D'Onofrio. So I have this like secret man crush on Vincent D'Onofrio, particularly in Law and Order: Criminal Intent, and I love the interrogation scenes. So Criminal UK, Criminal United Kingdom, it's 3 episodes, great actors in it, really good, including David Tennant is one of the people being interrogated in one of them.
Oh, yes, I saw previews for this.
It's very good.
Is it good? I'm writing this down.
It's really, really fun and interesting and not like super, super dark. And it all takes place in and around the interrogation room, and that is it was just really a joy. So we watched the United Kingdom version, and we will definitely circle back, even though it'll be subtitles, and watch, because my understanding is that Netflix produced these all basically in the same mode, but 4 different countries. So there are 3 episodes for each of these countries. So I'm looking forward to seeing like how Germany's is different, how Spain's is different.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so I think that'll be really fun.
That's what I'm doing tonight.
Go watch it. I'd love to know what you think.
Okay.
Good. All right. Well, this has been What the What. We've been talking about Ted, the 6th episode of the Manhunt Unabomber series. And I really appreciate you guys both watching it and talking about it. I know it's been on my mind, so I think we had some interesting things to say.
All right, thanks for listening. That was What the What. You can follow us on social media at WTW Popcast, and that's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
You can also email us at WTWpopcast@gmail.com.
And I just want to point out to everybody that is Popcast. So we're talking POP cast.
You can also find me on Twitter at Special Feather.
And you can find me on Twitter at the BW Fans and on YouTube, Bandwagon Fans.
And this is Scott. I'm available at Facebook and Instagram as Scott Grissel. So I'm Scott.
Jeff.
Renee.
And this has been What the What?
What the What?
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 What?